Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Happy New Year to everyone. If you haven't caught one of my previous videos around the New Year time, well, I probably said the same thing. But Happy New Year anyway, and Gemini Jets have announced their January 2023 releases. So it is time to do the usual ranking video, check out those models and see what I think. Now, Gemini is a brand that I am supposed to hate, but actually I think that they had a decent 2022. And looking back through the models they made, yeah, the variety isn't necessarily astounding, and you've got a lot of the same carriers, Lufthansa, American, Emirates, obviously, United, the same sort of regions, but taking Gemini for what they are, which is a manufacturer of mass market models for a relatively limited range of airlines, mainly from the United States and Europe, then you got to say that they actually hit some pretty decent high notes. And there was a reasonable amount of variety. There's, for example, a Luftwaffe Hercules that turned out quite nice. There was the Frontier Convair 580 that was really a good model. And they have started to use jcwings' latest molds in the 787s and 777s, which is a massive improvement on obviously the seen molds before. It doesn't mean to say the Gemini still don't balls up a decent number of models. They certainly balls up quite a few last year, but it does mean that they are producing an actually reasonably original and unique set, because surprisingly, even though NG are moving into a lot of their markets, there's still a decent number of models Gemini make that nobody else does. And now with an improved selection of molds, they've got actually a reasonable chance of competing. So, yeah, I guess I'm kissing Gemini's arse slightly there for some reason. They still don't like me, so it's not for any of those reasons. But I do think it was an okay year, and, you know, I think also that this January set of releases looks surprisingly decent as well. So we'll get onto those in a second. But first, obviously, subscribe to the channel, people. It's a new year. Always welcome new subscribers. There's going to be a lot of cool material coming up on the channel, so please subscribe and like the video. Check me out at Airlines on Instagram, and obviously keep your eyes peeled on the website because there's always new content going up there. Okay, now let's get over and look at what I think of this month's Gemini Jets. Okay, so the first model this month is in fact a couple of models. I talk about them together because they are both American Airlines 787-9s. One of them is the flaps down version and one of them is flaps up. So the good thing, obviously, that means that these are on the jcwings mold, which is excellent. So that is good. Their registration is N835AN, and it kind of shows, in a sense, Gemini's previous stranglehold on the US market, that when you look back through releases for American 787-9s, there really haven't been very many at all. There have been two previous Gemini releases, both on the old seamed mold, and there was one ngmodels version made in 2020, back when the NG 787 was a little bit of a hot rod and had quite tall main gear. So there has not really been a definitive American Airlines 787-9 made, and I think that these jcwings based versions that Gemini are going to produce here should be really good, and I think there's almost certainly a strong market need for them too. So I think these are actually a really good selection choice, and they're going to be on a good mold, and they should turn out really nicely. As people probably know, I like gimmicks on the models, and I think the flaps down is a really nice concept. It doesn't mean I always buy flaps down models. I do have a few, but I like the idea. I like the innovation. I think it's a really good thing that JC introduced, and it's good that Gemini have been able to use it now as well. And I think these will be super nice models. So I think we're starting off quite nicely with these two. And I'm going to put the flaps down version up into supersonic actually, and I'm going to put the standard version into high flyer. I was surprised that there is this lack of American 787-9s. But I think that a lot of people will be interested in replacing their old Gemini versions with the seam. And these ones might even be better than the NG version from 2020. Next up is what is perhaps the model of this set for me and for many people, I think. It's an Aeroflot Ilyushin IL-62M wearing the Soviet-era colours with the hammer and sickle flag on the tail. The registration is CCP, or really it's SSSR, isn't it? 86492. And there have only been a pair of Aeroflot IL-62s made previously, both of them by Gemini, both of them a long time ago. It is really nice to see the return of this mould, and I hope to see more of them, though I wouldn't hold my breath too long. I'd be surprised if we see many. It is somewhat a shame that we only get Aeroflot for these Soviet-era airliners, and they don't branch out into a more diverse range of airlines. There is quite a decent range of IL-62s they could make, but none of them will probably meet the production run criteria for Gemini, unfortunately. However, this model does have some potential for producing custom models from it for airlines that use the Aeroflot base scheme, so there's definitely potential for producing some interesting IL-62s, although that does mean that there's still lots of IL-62s that I'd like to get made, which probably never will. Maybe one day JC will use the mold more often. I should also point out that for a lot of people who had the previous release, which was the same livery but with the official Olympic carrier titles on it, they have suffered zinc rot with that model, which is a real shame. I'm not going to get too much into zinc rot. Check out my page on yesterdaysairlines.com to learn about zinc rot, what it is, and how it came about. It is bad. Bad for the models. It's bad that it ever happened. There's been no recompense for people who have zinc rot models. That's not great either. I have to say I actually own that version of the IL-62, and my version doesn't have zinc rot, so it's really hit and miss which models end up getting the rot, even amongst models that are known for it, as that IL-62 is. But anyway, this new release will give people the option to replace their old model if it does have zinc rot, though it's a bit cheeky them having to pay for it again. It just is the world, I guess. Nonetheless, all of that said, great to see some classics, great to see some more diverse molds being used, and actually this livery hasn't actually been made before because, as I said, the previous version had the official Olympic carrier titles on it. We've never had one in the Soviet era scheme without those. So, yeah. This is obviously going to be supersonic, guys. This is going to be a great model. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Next up, we've got another A380. And it is somewhat ironic that as the A380 leaves service for a lot of airlines, we're getting more and more 400 scale versions of it. Obviously stimulated by the appearance of the new AV400 mold, which is amazing. If you haven't seen my review of the China Southern version of that model, then get over to yesterdaysairlines.com, because the mold is great with detachable landing gear and loads of other awesome features in a really good shape. But we're here to discuss this next Gemini release, which is their 10th British Airways A380. This one is registered GXLEL, and that's reg has not been made before, but obviously they've made lots of these previously. Probably some of them have been for BA themselves. A couple, I think, were even for Harrods, the department store in the UK. The shortcomings of the JC Gemini A380 are reasonably well known. It's not appalling, but it does have a weak nose. The curvature of the wings isn't great. In general, it's just not the best mold that there is out there for the A380. It was always inferior to the Phoenix mold, and it is certainly inferior to the Aviation 400 mold that is just coming out. So I don't really see any reason to be looking at acquiring this model when you can get a much better British Airways A380. Simple as that. This mold is not up to standard anymore, and really I don't see any reason why people should be buying it when there's a vastly superior alternative out there, and also in the Phoenix version a superior alternative. So yeah, this one's, I'm going to put this in gas guzzler. I think that this mold's time has come, and now I've seen the new AV400 version, I don't really feel the need to ever get this mold again. So I'm going to put this one in gas guzzler. Next up, Gemini continue their release of Lockheed Electras, and they produced quite a few last year. This is their 6th using the jcwings mold. I've talked about the mold quite a bit in the previous videos as they've been releasing them. Some of the releases have been a bit hit and miss in terms of the printing detail and some of the quality control. The images I've seen, for example, of the previous Eastern release were poor. The images I've seen of the most recent national release actually were quite nice. So there's decent potential here. This one is wearing Eastern Airlines scheme, but it's in one of the early Eastern Airlines schemes, and it is registered N5507. So this one's got the colours of Fly Eastern's prop jet Electra. It's wearing that Golden Falcon scheme. Eastern had a couple of different naming variants for their Electras around this time. So they got the Fly Eastern's prop jet Electra, then they also had a Fly Eastern's Electra prop jet titled version in this scheme. I really like the livery, but I already own the Aero Classics version of this model, and to be honest, I'm not going to replace it. I'm not convinced still by the finish on these Eastern Electras, and as much as it is a classic, it's almost a little disappointing that Gemini have decided to go through Electras when there are other classic types that are less well covered in 400 scale. So yeah, I'm not overly excited by it, even though it is a classic, and I'm going to put this one into Workhorse. It'll probably be okay, but I'm not convinced they'll do a good job. And at the same time, I already own another version of it anyway. Okay, that leaves us with 7 releases to go, and we move into more modern territory now with a Boeing 767-300 freighter, and this is in the colours of FedEx. The registration is N104FE. I like the Gemini 767. It's a seamed mold, but it's a good seamed mold, and the seam doesn't really have any particularly strong impact on the model. JC have been releasing on this mold quite a bit recently too, made some nice versions. They made a Polish example, they made a KLM example, and they look nice. So I think the mold's good, and FedEx core Gemini territory. My only reservation with this is it's not the first time that Gemini have made a FedEx 767-300 freighter. They made one in 2018, so not that long ago, 4 years, and they made N103FE. So is there a need for another one? I imagine it'll sell, but it isn't thrilling re-releasing models when they don't produce that many models a month anyway. So yeah, for me, I'm going to put this one into Workhorse with the Electra. It's not a bad model by any means. I'm sure it'll turn out super nice, but it's been done before by them only 4 years ago. So yeah, not really exciting me. Next up is Sun Country, and we've got a 737-800 with the similar winglets. It's N842SY. The scheme is subtly different to schemes that have been made before because it is an aircraft with a 40 years of flight sticker on it, which is, I think, celebrating Sun Country's 40th anniversary. It's a lovely scheme. Sun Country got good livery. They're not the first, Gemini are not the first people to make a 738 in this scheme. Panda Models made one, I think it was recently, last year in fact. Maybe that was one of the ones they made for Waffle, I can't remember. And NG have made one as well, though the NG one has blended winglets, not the scimitars. This is going to be inferior to both of those, isn't it? The mould is vastly inferior. Last month there were a couple of 737-800s they released, Avelo and Pobeda. Both of them, I've seen pictures of them, not the Gemini pictures, but you know, pictures that actually enable you to judge the model, and they look awful. It certainly doesn't help that in the images I've seen, the wings are kind of pointing at this crazy angle. They really don't look good at all, and I cannot recommend people buying the mold. The mold has enough issues even before you stuff up putting the wings on the bloody thing. It's got this big pointy nose, it's got gigantic nose gear door, which isn't in the right place necessarily because it's just flat along its bottom edge. The engines are a bit cruddy, and generally it's not a great mold. I mean, this one is crying out to be no better, and I don't see why you'd really get it unless you're desperate to get one with that 40 years of flight sticker on it when you could get the Panda version, which is going to be much nicer. So this one's definitely a gas guzzler for me. It's really not going to be particularly good. It's not a million miles from scrap metal after I've seen the pictures of last month's versions actually, but I won't put it in scrap metal. It can stay as a gas guzzler. Okie doke. Now we've got 3 Emirates models, and I know everyone hates Gemini producing Emirates, but we've talked about why they do before. They get a lot of money from it. It's a real cash cow for them, and I don't blame them for that. Now, this month's models are actually quite interesting, and they're not just more A380s. The first one is a 777 freighter on the new interactive mold, and I like the interactive series, and as someone pointed out to me just recently, the interactive series 777s have actually got even hinges on the doors, which is a really nice touch. So they've done good work there. Gemini has been actually producing quite a number of these interactive 777 freighters, and the ones I've seen look really nice. So it's really hard to be too tough on Gemini when they're producing really nice looking models using a great mold, which is innovative and nobody else has access to. So this may well be just an Emirates version, but it is a unique model that no one else is going to be making, and that makes it more interesting. So what I'm saying here is I think this will be a good model. The aircraft is A6EFG. They have made Emirates freighter 777s before, obviously, but they were all made previously on the seamed mold and not on this mold, which is slot-in wings and derived from the exceptional jcwings 777. So this is going to be a really good model, and yeah, I think that this one is going to be deserving of a decent score. I like this model. I think this is going to be good, even though it is just Emirates. So I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. I think it's going to be a really nice release, and if I collected many cargo aircraft, it will be on my list, even though it is just another Emirates. Following that up, we've got another couple of Emirates, and they both represent the same aircraft, and it is kind of a fantasy aircraft because this is the Emirates 777-9. The registration is A6EZA, and the reason that they've got that reg on it is because the first Emirates 777 had, you can see the ZA apparently on the nose gear, so it suggests that will be the registration for it. My only reluctance with this release is, well, there are a couple of things. Firstly, Emirates aren't going to receive their 777s till 2025, assuming they just don't cancel the whole bloody lot, and they've recently moved 30 over the 787s. They've still got over 100 on order though, I think, so I'm sure they will get them, but not for a couple of years. So it seems a bit early to be making the model of the aircraft unless it's going to be rolled out soon. The other issue is that there are obviously 2 versions of this mold, one with wing tips down and one with the wing tips folded up, which is a little annoying. It would be so much better if they could have that as an interactive feature and you wouldn't need 2 versions. Obviously it's possible. I understand it may be due to Boeing that it is this way, some kind of licensing annoyance, and that's, I guess, another reason why licensing your models with the airlines and the manufacturers is kind of like bogus because it limits what you can do, and at the end of the day it's not good for customers. So yeah, they've got 2 releases here, one with the wingtips up, one with it down, and because the mold itself has to be produced in those 2 separate versions and you can't have it as an interactive feature, so that's disappointing. Having said that, it is still going to be an interesting model. They have made into Gemini did make an Emirates 777-9 before, but one without a reg, and I imagine that was perhaps even for Emirates themselves. Yeah, actually, I still think this was going to be a nice model. Now this is going to make it. It is reasonably unique, and I'm still going to put it into high flyer, despite the things I've said. The mold I like. I've reviewed the jcwings version with the wingtips up, and I liked it. They couldn't print the cockpit window line in the right place, but hopefully Gemini will do a better job on that. Otherwise, I think it will be a decent model. yeah, I think it'll be nice. Now that leaves us 2 models, and these 2 are both quite interesting as well. The last airliner released this month is an MD-80, which should fill me with joy and glee, but kind of just fills me with a little bit of a smile, because it's a contemporary MD-80 for a bit of a nothing airline called World Atlantic Airlines, which is kind of like an Acme charter airline that flies around the Caribbean a bit, has some dealings in Venezuela, and flies some flights for the US government, I think, probably deporting people. It's a kind of a nothing airline. The livery is present enough. The aircraft is registered N808 Whiskey Alpha. I should be super happy because they don't make many MD-80s, but it slightly annoys me that I'm thinking, looking back at how many they've made, and the last one they made was in 2021, and the New York Air version, which was really nice. And so what, they're going to make one every 2 years, and the one they've chosen to make is World Atlantic, rather than, what, Alitalia? Or SAS? or TWA? I mean, what? So, you know, it's annoying. It's like they're taunting you when they do this kind of thing. They've produced an MD-80, hooray, it's for a rubbish airline, boo, and there are still all these other airlines. You know, Delta Ron Allen, you know, all these other airlines that are really core MD-80 operators, mainly from the past, but hell, they're producing a lot of pointless Electras. Why can't they be producing some really worthwhile MD-80s? Frontier, Air Cal, you know, these kind of airlines, for crying out loud. No, it's World Atlantic. But I shouldn't hold that against the release. It's not an A320, it's not a 737, it is at least a Mad Dog, and World Atlantic's livery isn't too bad. I was still going to put it into high flyer, even though I'm a little bit annoyed it's not something a lot more interesting than it is. And we end this month with the Gemini Max release, and this is a Boeing B-52H Stratofortress. And Max releases often kind of pass me by because I don't collect military releases, but the more I look at these Gemini Max releases, the more I like them. And I've seen pictures of the previous release from 2021, and I have to say, it looks really good because the B-52 is such an awesomely cool looking aeroplane. The mold looks nice, and it almost makes me think I should be buying some of these because they're so diverse and different to civil airliners. So yeah, this one's in the colours, I think, in Minot Air Force Base. I mean, I don't care about the colours, they're all bloody grey. But it's a B-52. It's only the second one they made, and hey, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I have to say, I'm rather taken by this, and I think this will be a really nice model, and I'm sure that military collectors will be super happy to see another B-52. And this one's also going to skip up there into high flyer. And that rounds up this month's releases. And as you can see, it's a really decent month for Gemini, even though they haven't necessarily strayed too far from their base in producing American and British Airways and Emirates and even Aeroflot. There are some cool models here. They've found a kind of a groove which other people haven't been hitting, and I think that the American 787, the Aeroflot IL-62, the Emirates 777s, you know, the World Atlantic MD-80, the FedEx 767 and that B-52, they were doing really nice models, you know, unless Gemini make an enormous cock-up or something, and hopefully they won't. And it's really just the A380 and the 737, which are a bit of a waste of time and nobody really probably needs. So hopefully this is a good start, you know, and they'll carry on this way in 2023, producing some more interesting and unique combos that other brands are not going to be able to reproduce because they don't have the mold, or because they don't make models in, you know, Gemini's core space, I guess. Obviously, I would like to see more MD-80s. I'd like to see some Convair 580s. I'd like to see some more IL-62s. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if you see any of those all year. But you never know. You never know. For this month, I think Gemini have done a good job. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Check me out at the website. As always, loads of new material coming up for the new year. Thanks again. and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.